Today I'm taking a look at what's a bit more of an obscure book, but one that I think is worth your attention, particularly if you're a Christian or if you're interested in the creation and evolution debate. Welcome to Books and Big Ideas, what I'm reading, what I'm thinking about, with Joel Wentz. All right, so what is up with this book, Death Before the Fall? I'm going to go through the main idea, the research, readability, and reasonableness, like I usually do. But first of all, the main idea here, it's ostensibly about Genesis 1 and the creation accounts and the problem that animal suffering causes for kind of the strict literalist reading of Genesis 1. Namely that if there are tigers and lions and carnivores in the world, did they eat vegetables before the fall of Adam and Eve or not? That's kind of the surface level question asked by the book. But, and this is why I wanted to feature this book, it's actually about a lot more than that. It's in my opinion, it's kind of unfortunately titled and unfortunately presented by the cover art because it's about so much more than just that question about interpreting Genesis 1. And really, the main idea, if I can summarize it as such, the main idea of Osborn's work here is a deep, deep exploration of the implications and philosophy and sociology and psychology of these strict historicist literalist readings of Genesis chapter 1. It's about all the implications that flow out of a really, really strict hyper-literalist reading of Genesis 1. And so it's a fascinating look at a very multifaceted kind of topic. And it's not really even just about the problem of animal suffering before the fall of Adam and Eve. So the main idea is just what are the implications of, what are like all the deep implications of a strict literalist reading of Genesis 1, namely a young earth reading, anti-evolution kind of reading. That's what the book's about. And so the research, again, if you look at the cover and you look at the topic, you'd think it would only be about kind of ancient Near East creation accounts and maybe Old Testament commentaries and Old Testament scholarship and Hebrew translations. And it's really a lot more about, like I said, sociology, psychology. He talks about kind of the group dynamics of certain religious cult movements, and he talks about the psychology, the appealing psychology of like a kind of a certainty-driven religious movements. And he even goes into a whole chapter on the philosophy of foundationalism and the appeal of a creationist account as kind of a foundationalist epistemology. So he gets into epistemology and philosophy in that chapter. So it's a wide-ranging book. It touches on lots of different topics and is well researched in all those areas, especially, and this will get to my second point, which is probably my highest rating, even though I don't give ratings or numbers, but my highest kind of marks, so to speak, would be for the readability of it. I almost read this entire book in one sitting, just kind of gulped it down because it's so, not conversationally written, but so smoothly written. It's written in a way that is compelling. It's impassioned and yet academically seasoned. It's impassioned and convicted at the same time. It's not just a polemical screed. And in fact, he's very gracious towards literalist kind of creationist readings, even while he's pointing out the very, very deep and troubling problems with them. And he takes great care to point out that a lot of people who are perpetuating these readings are doing so under really the best and most sincere and innocent of intentions. And yet he is hypercritical of it. It's very readable, very compelling, and as his passion kind of comes through the page, it really pulls you in. And I found myself just really, just drawn into it as I would by a good sermon or a good lecture. So highly, highly, highly readable book. And then finally, the reasonableness of it. So for me coming into this, I'm not a young earth creationist in my reading of Genesis. So I didn't need to be convinced on that point. And I'm actually not sure if someone came in really committed to that view. I'm not sure how they would interact with this book. They might kind of bounce off of it because it's such a sharp rebuttal of that. So I'm not sure it's a good book. I'm not sure if it's a good book for that person or not. But for someone like me, who already was kind of on the same page with him on that, I was pleasantly shocked by the deeper exploration that's in this book. So I went into it thinking it was going to be really narrowly focused on this question of animal suffering and kind of the morality of that, and what do we do with the possibility that animals killed each other before sin was introduced into the world in the Genesis narrative. Like, what do we do with that? It's not, like I said at the beginning, it's not ostensibly just about that. It's about so much more about what does it mean to be a certainty-driven foundationalist in kind of your commitments to reading scripture. And I loved the chapter on psychology, the psychological kind of appeal of that. It's actually really helpful for someone who's been out of that perspective for a while to read and see, oh yeah, there's deep psychological reasons that someone might find this kind of view compelling or attractive, or at least easier to submit to. But also, there's a really great chapter on Gnosticism. I was surprised. I felt like every time I got into a new chapter, I was surprised at the topics that came up. Again, because it's such a wide-ranging book. And so the chapter on Gnosticism, second to maybe J. Cameron Carter's book up here behind me, Race, A Theological Account, has a fantastic account of Gnosticism. This book, though, is kind of right up there with that one in terms of its account of Gnosticism, the breakdown of summary of Gnosticism, which is a notoriously difficult to define kind of philosophical approach. So I loved that chapter as well, and I just, all told, I thought he does a great job at preventing a sharply argued but gracious rebuttal of, like I said, this hyper-literal, hyper-certainty-driven creationist reading of Genesis. But not just on the surface of it, it's more of an exploration of all the implications that flow out of it for religion and practice and ethics and philosophy and epistemology and all of that. So I think it's a really successful book. Like I said, I wish it was branded a little differently. I think that might be why it doesn't have the attention that I wish it did. But man, if you're interested in any of those various topics, sociology, psychology, Gnosticism, and if you're interested, of course, in creation or evolution and how to read Genesis well, Genesis 1 in particular, Death Before the Fall is outstanding by Ronald Osborn, and I think you can get it on clearance actually from InterVarsity Press, the publisher, so jump on that if it's a book that's of interest to you. Would highly recommend it. I was surprised by it. I was surprised by its breadth. I was surprised by the writing style, and I really am gonna highly recommend it and return to it in the future. So there you go, Death Before the Fall by Ronald Osborn. Thanks for watching. I hope you appreciated this review. Let me know if there's other books of this ilk, of this category that you'd like me to explore. I'd be happy to take a look at them. Thanks.